Child labor is a cruel topic. You may not be aware of this, but children were forced to work in tough conditions in the past. If you were a child born into slavery over 150 years ago, your life would be extremely different from what it is like today. But how different exactly and how hard? You may not think it would be too difficult, but it could be. The level of severity would depend on several factors. Your life would be much harder if you lived on a large plantation in the South rather than on a small one in Virginia. It would be much harder if you worked in the fields with adults rather than in the house with the owner's children. It would be even harder if your owner used cruel punishment or broke up your family by selling your parent or sibling. Pretend you're a house slave in Virginia, which might be the best scenario. You are constantly working on chores from dawn till dusk, and it's tiring work, but it's still much better than working outside in the field. Your main job might be caring for the owner's family's child who is slightly younger than you are. You are that child's personal servant and companion. You might be friends, but no one would ever forget that you are the owner's property. Could you do chores all day from the age of 6, such as cleaning bathrooms, mopping, and washing laundry? We know about children's experiences in slavery because of personal journals and writings they left behind. Many authors even wrote children's books about slaves' experiences. For example, the book Henry's Freedom Box, written by Ellen Levine, explains the true story of Henry Box Brown. Henry Brown wasn't sure how old he was. Henry was a slave, and slaves weren't allowed to know their birthdays. Henry and his brothers and sisters worked in the big house where the master lived. Henry's master had been good to Henry and his family. But Henry's mother knew things could change. Do you see those leaves blowing in the wind? They are torn from the trees like slave children are torn from their families. One morning, the master called for Henry and his mother. They climbed the wide staircase. The master lay in bed with only his head above the quilt. He was very ill. He beckoned them to come closer. Some slaves were freed by their owners. Henry's heart beat fast. Maybe the master would set him free. But the master said, "You are a good worker, Henry. I am giving you to my son. You must obey him and never tell a lie." Henry nodded. But he didn't say thank you. That would have been a lie. Later that day, Henry watched a bird soar high above the trees. Free bird, happy bird, Henry thought. Henry said goodbye to his family. He looked across the field. The leaves swirled in the wind. Henry worked in his new master's factory. He was good at his job. "Do not tear the tobacco leaf," the boss yelled at the new boy. He poked the boy with a stick. If you made a mistake, the boss would beat you.
Henry went on to struggle throughout his life. He was eventually a free man, but not until a later age. As a result of the civil rights movement in the mid-1800s, the 13th Amendment was ratified in 1865, which abolished slavery, including child slavery. However, children suffered a different kind of slavery in the mid-1800s, even as slavery was coming to an end. When America went to war with Great Britain in 1812, the Industrial Revolution hit America, forcing the creation of hundreds of factories in major cities. This brought the increasing need for labor, even child labor. Families moved to the cities to work in the factories, mills, and the mines. Children began working at the age of 6 years old, and they would work up to 19 hours a day all week long. Sometimes these children would work even in the most dangerous jobs that adults could not. They were forced to crawl in small places in mines and place dynamite where required. Many would even die from the ground collapsing under them or from diseases. In the factories, children worked with dangerous machinery and often lost a limb or fingers. Sadly, when children were injured, they were replaced and lost their job, which would upset their parents and decrease their total income. Most of them also didn't receive hospital care because they could not afford it. Eventually, labor laws took into effect because of the dramatic results of the Industrial Revolution. People started to see how dangerous these environments were, and many began protesting. One man was interviewed in 1849 who worked in a mill as a child. He said,
"We went to the mill at 5 in the morning. We worked until dinner time and then to 9 or 10 at night. On Saturday, it could be till 11, often till 12 at night. We were sent to clean the machinery on the Sunday.
Another man explains.
2 children I know got employed in a factory when they were 5 years old. The spinning men or children employ children if they can get a child to do their business. And they will take that child before they take an older one who will cost more.
Eventually, workers created labor unions, which were groups of workers who protested for better working environments and regulations. In the early decades of the 20th century, the number of child laborers peaked. Child labor began to decline as labor and reform movements grew and standards began improving. These organizations shared common goals of challenging child labor. The National Child Labor Committee's work was combined with other efforts to provide free education for all children and the passage of the Fair Labor Standards Act in 1938, which set federal standards for child labor.
Thanks to these efforts, children are now required to wait until they are 16 years old to apply for a job which must meet certain standards. You gain the right to free public education. You gain the freedom to wake up every day in your own home alongside your family. You gain the ability to make decisions for yourself, your freedom, and your future. Could you have survived the harsh conditions of the Industrial Revolution as a child? Could you have survived the cruelty children in forced labor withstood hundreds of years ago? Which would you choose? Or could you even make the choice?